Hey class, welcome back to our the Great War PowerPoint video series here where I'm going through the different slides and the different concepts. Today we're going to be reviewing slides 8 and 9, which have to do with you can see at the top there, fighting World War One. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the different strategies and methods and also the evolution of warfare fighting. So you can see the text there. Germany had an alliance with Austria-Hungary and declared war on Serbia. That was following the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. um, Germany's leader, Kaiser Wilhelm, used this opportunity to move troops to its western borders with France and Belgium. Um, During this time, if you can remember back to our talk about alliances, France had an alliance with Russia. And so, France and Germany, if you ever look at a map, the eastern side of France borders the western side of Germany. So that's why much of the fighting in World War One, at least at the beginning, was fought in France. Russia had an alliance with Serbia also, and would help them fight Austria and Germany. And then here's that alliance with Britain and France. By September 1914, about 6 million soldiers were sent to war across Europe. This battle began, and what is called trench warfare. Trench warfare is basically there were about 600 miles of deeply dug trenches all the way across France. It was a really, really dated, old school method of fighting, and it did not work. You know, in most cases, most of the soldiers that had died during this time and this type of warfare. Um, were not killed in battle. They were killed because of what existed in these trenches and how nasty and disgusting they were. You can see up here where you're going to fill in your trench warfare box. It talks about rats, lice, diseases. It was really, really difficult to get medical treatment in there because if you come out into what's called no man's land, which is the flat land up above the trenches, then obviously you are in you were very susceptible to being attacked by by the enemy, and so you had to all of the medics, all of the aid and care. They couldn't get you out of the trench. It had to be done in those trenches again, and there were just tons and tons of different things that you do not want to have to deal with while you're mending up a soldier who perhaps had been shot or whatever the case is. So trench warfare was a very dated um, method of fighting. Um, Neither side was really able to make much progress, and so the trench warfare pretty much led to the beginning of World War One, ending in what is known as a stalemate, which is basically where neither side wins. So it was really interesting. Um, that they chose to fight that way at first, but you'll see as we move on to the new weapons slide, certainly things change there. You can thank General Pershing from the United States and a few other countries, and also just the revolution of industrialization that we've been talking about since the late 1800s. So we talked about trench warfare. It didn't take long for them to realize that you're going to have to fight differently. We're going to have to utilize the advancements that were created during the Industrial Revolution. Remember, we've found ways to mass produce steel. We have found different ways to make new weapons, different methods of transportation, and so countries in general generals and war leaders were figuring out how to leverage this new technology, and that would most certainly change the way that this war was fought, and then every war from then on out. Traditional cavalry was phased out for the use of tanks. Airplanes, which had just been invented about 15 years before the war, were first used for scouting. They would fly over enemy territory. They would map out the trenches. They would figure out where the most vulnerable parts are, and they would attack them then. But then they also began putting bombs on planes and started using them for fighting. Machine guns out the back of planes. Um, Submarines were firing torpedoes at ships. Machine guns could fire multiple rounds in just seconds. So you can see that the advancements that we've talked about outside of the war, these things were not created for the use of war, so to speak, but they would certainly go on to help the way that the war was fought. And then finally, the use of barbed wire, they would fortify their trenches so people couldn't run in and attack them. And then the last thing, which probably had the biggest impact on the way that countries fought the war, was poisonous gas and things like mustard gas. Chemical warfare was huge at this time, huge advancement, and would go on to probably make the biggest difference from all of our efforts there. And you can see here, make sure that you fill in this box of new weapons. World War I was the first modern war, modern in quotation marks, because they realized that the traditional cavalry's riding in on horseback, all of those things were dated, and they would not work with such a widespread war. Airplanes were first used to scout terrain and then were used for battle. And then submarines and torpedoes were used in wars at sea. The Navy became really, really involved. And then poisonous gases and chemical weapons would increase the death tolls. So that's it for slides 8 and 9. If you have any questions filling out the information or anything else, you can refer to our Google Hangout. You can shoot me an email at jseal@nsacademy.org, or you can send me a message on SaintsNet. Thank you.